Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another thrilling episode of Atheist Church Audit. Happy Easter and Merry Pascha to all of my believing friends out there. I still don't think that Jesus rose from the dead, but all the best to all my friends who think he did. This wouldn't be an orthodox video without a old-fashioned, am I right? Boys and girls, this weekend has been an absolute doozy. Last week, I went to the Jehovah's Witnesses Memorial of Jesus' Death. This Friday, I went to Duke University for their Good Friday chapel service. I got very little sleep that night. Then Saturday evening, I went and drove way out of my way to a Pascha service, slept in my car for 3 hours, and then went to an Agape Vesper service back here in Raleigh. It takes a lot to get me here, man, but I am all religioned out after all of this. As soon as I'm done filming this video, I'm gonna go play Grand Theft Auto and commit usury. But all the same, let's dive into this Pascha service that I went to today. I had the pleasure of going to Holy Cross Orthodox Church in Kernersville. And I'm not gonna lie, I knew that I wanted to go to a proper Pascha service because last year, if you'll recall, I missed it by like this much. And now that I'm here on the other side of it, truthfully, it seems like a blessing in disguise because I think that had I gone to a Pascha service a year ago, it would have been way too much, way too soon, and I probably would have given it more crap than I will today. So in preparing to go to a Orthodox church for their Pascha service, I had a whole host of options available to me. And it was a struggle because I have had literally an invitation to pretty much every single Orthodox church in North Carolina. So I kind of ended up playing Russian roulette with this thing and just, sent it on one. And I'm glad I picked Holy Cross because they were lovely. From what I can recall, this is a pretty new cathedral to them, which is not surprising because there are a ton of new cathedrals in Orthodoxy. I don't know if it's a cathedral or a church or basilica, I don't care. But yeah, I drove more than an hour to get to this church, and the service started at 11:30. And can I be so legit right now? I thought, man, it's Pascha, I don't think it's real, I don't believe in any of this, but it's still like, you gotta get into the spirit, you gotta, really give it your all. I wanna experience it for what it is, because I think it's beautiful. So for Lent, it's not vegan, but like it's largely vegan, I think. So there was no way in hell that I was gonna, actually fast meat for 40 days. I eat probably half a cow a week. Minimum. But in lieu of doing the proper Lent fast, I decided that I would just fast the day before Pascha. And I know you're not supposed to talk about when you fast because that's what the scribes and Pharisees do, but I'm a heretic and those rules don't apply to me. So driving up to this place, it was just water and black coffee all day. And I was hoping that it would kind of put me in this like, euphoric state, like you're phasing in and out of consciousness. Maybe I'm gonna stumble into the church and the icons on the walls are gonna start talking to me. And I'm gonna be so for real, I think it just made me cranky. There was a part of me that like really regretted doing that because it was like, I wanted to, enjoy the service and enjoy the beauty of it. But I was like, man, I'm just tired and hungry and my back hurts. I don't know if this is relevant or not. This is an OCA church, Orthodox Church in America. And I think it's a thing, maybe, of OCA churches that they tend to not have pews or chairs. So it was standing. Oh, buddy, you were doing a lot of standing. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. I pull up to this big, beautiful church, freshly built, super cool, stylized architecture from the outside. And I also need to say this, my bedtime is 10 o'clock. And if I am not asleep by 10:30, then shame on me. So even driving out to this place at 11:30, it was bad. I was falling asleep on the road. I am a danger to myself and others past 9 p.m. But I finally make it in one piece. I get out of my car in kind of like a sleepy stupor and stumble my way into the church. And within 2 seconds, I get recognized. One of the people there was one of my Patreon supporters. Hi, Nikki, appreciate you. And yeah, it was a very sweet, warm welcome right from the get-go. I feel like I have to, be a hard ass or something and say like, yeah, but I'm a pseudo celebrity or something, so it doesn't count. But even accounting for that, man, the people were just lovely. And I've been to a lot of other places recently where people recognize me, and sometimes they're quick to jump in and want to, psychoanalyze me or bring me back into the fold. But I just had a lot of really lovely first interactions with people that were very chill and down to earth, and it was awesome. But I say all that to say that like walking from the car in this sleepy stupor into the church and being, greeted by 3 or 4 different people, it was like, all right, we're doing this thing. So now I'm wide awake and I walk into the service. There's no pews, there are just people holding unlit candles. And I'm going to be so legit about this. This was a very, very long service. Very long. Long, 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 long. If this is your Catholic service, it was that. It was like that. Buddy boy, I got to that church at like 11:10 p.m. I did not leave that church until 5:30 in the morning. The service itself went from 11:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. That wasn't a marathon, it was a blitzkrieg on my soul. Woof. But I say all of that to say that there was a lot that happened in that service, and I'm going to butcher the details so hard. It is a very elaborate, very ornate, very complicated liturgy that they go through over the course of that 4 hours. 4 hours. But thankfully, all of it was really beautiful. I had this really cool experience early on of talking to a guy in there. I want to say his name was Joseph, but he was a recent convert, as are a lot of these people. And I was kind of shooting the breeze with him, and he was saying like, yeah, I was raised Southern Baptist, and then was a non-Christian for a little while, and then became Orthodox a couple years ago. And he made the comment in passing, like, man, my parents had to drag me to church when I was a kid, and now here in the Orthodox Church, I just don't want to leave. And that's compelling, man. That's beautiful and compelling. Even, with as cushy as evangelicals tried to make a lot of their modern services, it doesn't have that same appeal, that same lore as something like this for a lot of people. So at this point, the liturgy starts, and the liturgy is comprised of a lot of chanting and a lot of singing. And the choir here was mwah, chef's kiss. I was told that the choir director here is Juilliard trained. And I don't know how to spell Juilliard, but I think that's pretty neat. In addition to some incredible singing there, you're doing a lot of chanting, you're doing a lot of singing, and man, I was genuflecting up a storm. I probably have divots in my shoulders from how many times I crossed myself. So from what I picked up in the liturgy, it starts in preparation of Jesus' passion and in Jesus' death. It starts in the Old Testament and talks about some of these Christophany passages. So it looks to Jonah in the belly of the whale for 3 days and looks at that as a foreshadowing for the resurrection of Christ, Christ being in the belly of the earth for 3 days. It looks at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're cast into the fiery furnace, and then there's a fourth person in there protecting them. They see that as a Christophany, as a foreshadowing of Jesus. So then early on in the service, all of the lights start to slowly dim as the liturgy goes on. And just like at the Duke Chapel service, the lights slowly dim down, they slowly turn off. And then finally, the last light goes out and it's pitch black in the room. And you're sitting in darkness for a minute. And then up at the front of the church, past the iconostasis, the front door opens and the priest comes out with a single lit candle. He lights one of the parishioners' candles, and then that parishioner lights the candle of another person, and then before you know it, there's a sea of lit candles everywhere, and they are illuminating the entire nave. And it is very cool, and it is very beautiful. And then once everyone's candles are lit, they make a huge procession out of the church, and then they start marching around the church with hundreds of lit candles as they're singing in unison. They make 3 laps around the church, and over again they are chanting, "Thy resurrection, O Christ our Savior, the angels in heaven sing. Enable us on earth to glorify thee in purity of heart." And it was cool, man. Like, even if you don't believe in any of this, it is a cool spectacle to see. And it's clear that this is the kind of reverence that a miracle like this, in theory, deserves. So then this was by far the coolest part of the service, and it caught me a little bit by surprise. The entire congregation is surrounding the priest outside of the church, and then he shouts to everyone, "Christ is risen," and everyone shouts in unison, responding to him and says, "Indeed he is risen." And then he says it in Greek, "Christos anesti," and then everyone responds in Greek, "Alethos anesti." And then this part, this was magical. The priest slams his fist on the door 3 times. I mean, it's just so like authoritative, right? I mean, if you actually believe that a dude came back from the dead and that, the entire cosmology of heaven and hell are somehow impacted by this singular event, it's a big deal. And something about that just like feels so authoritative. It's got that oomph behind it, right? I contrast that moment with the moment from the Jehovah's Witnesses where they say, "And this concludes our memorial service." And like the two emotions that I felt could not be more different, where one feels just straight up blasphemous. Like, do you actually think that Christ's death accomplished anything? Like, do you actually give a crap about any of that? Whereas here, the entire celebration of it seemed to match the energy and the weight and the gravitas of this theological event. And it was so beautiful. So the priest slams his fist on the door 3 times, and then there were people on the inside of the door who like dropped some black paneling, and it like revealed, you know, the inside of the church. So the church was totally blacked out when we walked out, and then you walk back in and it's totally illuminated again. And it's just mwah. Wow. Man, it's like I've seen so many, you know, church plays and things where like Christians will try to show some sort of visual representation for like how, you know, awesome and cool the resurrection was, and it just never quite scratches that itch. It always feels a little contrived or like a little silly, but this felt powerful. It felt cool. It felt weighty. So then as we make our way back into the church, everyone is chanting in unison over and over and over again. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. So at this point, it was maybe 1 a.m. And I was thinking like, oh, it's probably gonna be over soon, right? You know, I heard that there's like a big meal or something afterwards. That's gonna be cool. Maybe I'll be out of here by 2:30. Nope. It lasted for so long. I'm not gonna lie, I was like, okay, I think the cool part of the service has already happened. I wanna leave. Again, like I had not eaten in 24 hours. I was a little bit hungover also. I shouldn't say that. And I was just done, I was tired. I wanna go to bed. No, but the remainder of the service was very beautiful. And I'm not gonna lie, you guys remember my Jehovah's Witness video where I said that there was a guy who was like super excited about the fact that the Jehovah's Witness speaker brought up 24 Bible verses? Woof. If he saw this liturgy, he would lose his brain, because all of the chanting is just going through the scriptures. They're singing ancient hymns and literally just passages from the Gospels. Okay, now to gently tease my Orthodox homies. You knew it couldn't all be good. I'm still an atheist. So like I'm there and I'm vibing and I'm having a good time. So I'm a little tired. I'm a little tired. I smell the food outside. We were walking around the building and I smelled the food outside and I'm like, I was very hungry. And I look at my watch and I'm like, okay, cool. You know, 1:30 a.m. It's probably just about over. You know, this is just the epilogue. But I'm looking at my little book here and I'm like, why are we only a third of the way through? Why are we only a third of the way through? What is going on? Please tell me that this is for like next week's service. You know, this is today and then this is the next several days. No. Then it's 2 a.m. Then it's 2:30 a.m. Then it's 3 a.m. Then it's 3:15 a.m. I'm on the verge of tears. My back hurts. I'm hungry. I want to go home. And I was like so on board with the first half of the service. And then it felt like a lot of the chanting and stuff afterwards, it felt like there was a panel of very OCD Orthodox Christians who were like, let's tack on one more thing. Sorry, just let's tack on one more thing. Sorry guys, biggest event of the year. We really gotta cover our bases. Have we quoted the book of Habakkuk yet? We really need to include that in there. And I swear, towards the end of the night, like all of the priests' prayers started sort of sounding like a little bit more and more contrived. Heavenly Father, we want to come to you and we want to thank you for this day, and also you're super duper awesome, and also, oh, one more thing I forgot, please bless our bishop. Amen. Oh, also God, one last thing I forgot, while we still have you on the line, could you also bless our president and the armed forces of this great nation of ours? Amen. Also God, I apologize, I swear I don't mean to be a bother, however, we want to remember our sister Vicky because she just got an appendectomy. I'm kidding. It was very beautiful. The choir did a fantastic job and it was a very lovely service. I was just cranky. That's one of the other things that I was thinking about. It's like the Jehovah's Witness service was so short and so miserable that I would absolutely prefer to do a Pascha service again, even though it was a toll on my physical body, rather than have to suffer through the banality of a JW memorial service. So then towards the end of the service, they did a reading from the book of John, and like they did at the Agape Vespers last year, they had the thing where they read that passage from like a dozen different languages, and it's really beautiful to see. Mandarin, Arabic, Latin, Greek, it's really cool to see the universality of something like this. That always has been something that I've found to be more beautiful in Christianity than Islam, to be candid. Within Christianity, there's the sense that like it's always being translated. From its earliest days, the Gospels were translated into other languages. Whereas in Islam, the Quran is not the Quran if it is not in Arabic. So then the final moments of the service, the priest raising up the cross says, "Christ is risen," and everyone in unison shouts in response and says, "Indeed, he is risen." And it's this beautiful, triumphant moment. And even though I don't believe in any of this, I'm happy that people who are living this way and, experiencing this have something that is fulfilling to their souls. I think it's good. And then somewhere around that time, they started handing out, I think it's called friendship bread. That's what I've been calling it. We're going to stick with it. It's not the actual Eucharistic bread, but it's just bread that you go around and hand people. And so I had a lot of nice people come up to me and said that they had watched my channel and liked my videos for some reason. Please get your head checked. And then with that, we walk outside and have a big old potluck. Oh my God, there was so much food. And it was wonderful. It was awesome. It was like fun. And man, one thing that the Orthodox have on the Baptists, just right out the gate, bourbon. You know what goes down real smooth after a 24-hour fast? Just a big old shot of Jameson. Yum, yum, yum. Put it in my mouth. Yum, yum, yum. And so people were going to town. They were slinging drinks. They busted out some Georgian wine. It felt like properly festive. And then the priest goes around, to table, and he says, "Christ is risen." And then everyone at the table yells back to him, "Indeed, he is risen." And there's something like human feeling about it. Like, I think there's a sense of commiseration with the fasting. Like everyone's been suffering together all this time. It's not the kind of cliche, churchy potluck that feels a little forced. It's like, oh man, we frickin' did it. So it's that in conjunction with like an actual excitement about the beauty of the resurrection. And it's just genuinely really beautiful to see. I made some new friends, shook a few hands, ate way too much food, and then at exactly 5:30 in the morning, I started driving home. I had one person offer to put me up in a hotel. I had another couple offer to let me stay in their house. And I think normally I would have taken them up on an offer like that. But this time I just needed to leave. So I hopped in my car and tried to drive as far as I could back home to Raleigh. And I got about 5 minutes down the road and then pulled over to a Holiday Inn and slept in their parking lot. It's just kind of a tradition at this point for me to sleep in my car during Easter. Also, the priest here is a total G. He's the bass player in a band called Luxury, and he's damn talented, and you should go check out his band. Boom, 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 boom. I do think that he only plays a 4-string though, so I'm taking off points for that. So then, after a very generous, very comfortable 3-hour nap in my Acura, I drove back to Raleigh. And I was here for not very long before I got a text from somebody over at All Saints. And they gave me an invitation to go out to their Agape Vesper service, which they were doing in a park in Cary for some reason. I don't know why I said it like it was a bad thing. It was freaking awesome. And so on a last minute whim, I was like, yeah, screw it. I'll go out there. And I'm really glad that I did, because it felt like it kind of made the whole thing feel full circle, if you will. I won't bore you with the details of the Agape Vespers. I mean, it's a beautiful service, and doing it in the park was a huge W. There were a lot of similar things done at the Agape Vespers that they had done the previous night at the Pascha service. Ooh. And I gotta touch on this really quick. So Holy Cross is a OCA church, Orthodox Church of America. All Saints Church is an Antiochian church, which tends to be, a tiny bit more of Arabic vibe, showing those Levant roots. And as much as I loved the beautiful, stunning choir that was at the OCA church, this church had Byzantine chanting. Oh, and as a metalhead, it just, those minor seconds, it's so beautiful. It's not a contest. Please don't schism. Don't do it. Don't do it. But it does make a lot of sense to me that there's a lot of metalheads or former metalheads who are becoming Orthodox now. I was pleasantly surprised to see how many people at Holy Cross either had gauges or had very clearly like stretched their lobes at one point. My people, my people. But yeah, man, at the Agape Vespers, they did a lot of the same elements. They did the reading from the Gospel of John in multiple different languages. They did the thing where they paraded around the campsite. And likewise here out in this park, you heard the chant over and over again, Christos Anesti. And then everyone would say in response, Alithos Anesti. And then we ate more food, which was great because I was still hungry. And I think, you know, one of the things that was just so beautiful about this whole thing really was the family element. There was a lot of young families there. Like at Holy Cross, it's a late service, right? It starts at 11:30. And, you know, they bring their kids with them. And rather than like, I don't know, electrocuting the kids and like forcing them to stay awake, they literally brought sleeping bags and were like sleeping under a couple of the chairs that were pushed up against the wall in the back. There was a couple of kids just like sprawled out on the middle of the floor and you kind of had to, you know, tiptoe around them. And something about all of that just felt so human. And then here in the park, you know, kids were running around and screaming and laughing and it was great. So I hung out with the priest, shook the hand of a deacon, talked to some other people there for a while, and that was my Pascha experience. And I know that it feels like there should be like some big crescendo here, but there isn't. I mentioned at the beginning that like, you know, I was fasting for 24 hours prior to coming here, and I always have to stress this because nobody ever believes me. I am not a believer. But in spite of that, you know, I would warmly welcome any kind of, you know, crazy ecstatic experiences that might come about through hunger and profound storytelling. It's very easy for me to be moved to tears. I cry all the time during movies. And that didn't happen here this time. I have no misgivings about the fact that there are a lot of kind Orthodox people who are eager for me to join the fold and reconvert. And I don't see that happening. I was talking to one of my friends who is an Orthodox priest, and as we were talking, he told me, I believe you. He said, I really think that you're an atheist. And in a weird way, that meant a lot to me. There was one other Orthodox service that I never made a video about, and this parish has like a annual miracle where the light from the window comes in at such a certain angle at one time of the year, and it peers through the window and it illuminates the face of Christ. And I got an invite to go to that service. And so you're there and all the lights are off and the iconostasis is up at the front and everyone there is just waiting in darkness, in the quiet, waiting for that light to come and illuminate the face of Christ. And it was overcast that day. And his face never shone. But somehow sitting in silence in a room with 20 or 30 Christians, and there not being a miracle, that somehow meant more to me than Pascha or Easter or the Agape Vespers. I know that there's a lot of people rooting for me to give my life back to Christ or whatever. And I genuinely don't think that's going to happen. I know that a lot of people think like, oh man, I know how this story goes. He's going to be the next Lee Strobel or, you know, the next Joseph Smith. And people are, you know, anticipating this neat and tidy story of, you know, a guy who slips away for a little while and, you know, ultimately just crawls his way back. And you don't get that. You don't get a story like that. You get me. So happy Pascha, happy Easter, happy Resurrection Sunday to my believing friends. My name is Jared. I'm an atheist. Go to church.